Today we're going to be talking about trauma, the effects of trauma, how to recognize it, and how to heal from it. Physical trauma refers to pain when we have a break in the skin, and often some assault has surpassed our protection. It takes time to heal, and that area can be overly sensitive for some time. We'll be discussing more psychological trauma in today's video. So we're looking at emotional pain, and we're looking at how we react to that pain. Sometimes we feel triggered, sometimes we're hypervigilant, and we often feel the need to protect ourselves from further trauma. And that response can sometimes be healthy, and it can sometimes be disproportionate protection. And that protection in itself can cause issues to how we live our lives. Psychological trauma means often something's happened that has overwhelmed our ability to cope. It can refer to our response to natural disasters, for example, to accidents, to abuse like physical abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Neglect is the most common form of childhood abuse. And we try and protect ourselves in the future. That can involve having a lot of rules for ourselves. Can't go here, can't walk down that street, can't drive that car, can't talk to that person, can't do all these things because they all trigger me. And as we make all these rules for ourselves, we can make our world become smaller and smaller and more difficult for ourselves. And that can be a response to trauma. So we want to look at how we respond. What are your rules? What is your response? How have you dealt with adversity? And what is the best way to respond and deal with adversity? Looking at all the tools that Islam has given us, and also looking at psychological tools. So future protection. If you've been traumatized in the past, if you've had issues with early relationships, there's a theory called the attachment theory, which says that our early relationships, often with our caregivers, like our parents in early childhood, will affect how we develop relationships with other people. And if those relationships weren't healthy in the early days, that can affect how we develop relationships in the future. Maybe we struggle to trust people. Maybe we struggle to have healthy boundaries with people. We also might feel the need to protect ourselves, and that's quite normal. We might want to block out painful memories, painful emotions. We might want to suppress emotions. We might want to feel numb. I don't want to feel that pain. I'd rather feel nothing rather than just even feeling pain. And the problem with numbing ourselves and suppressing emotions is often when we build those boundaries, we don't just suppress the negative emotions, and we don't just numb ourselves from negative emotions, but actually all the emotions, even the positive ones, even letting love into our life, even being able to build healthy relationships can become a problem. So we might develop rules, we might become worried, we might develop anxiety, we might feel sad, we might feel depressed. What is a healthy response to trauma? One healthy response, there's lots of different layers to a healthy response to trauma. One of them is acceptance, is being able to accept whatever's happened, being able to file it away, that this is something that's happened in the past and I'm okay now, right now. Sometimes a lot of us will talk about something that happened, or this is what happened in my childhood, or my dad hit me, or my mother hit me, or something like this, or someone shouted at me. And the way we're talking about it, it's almost like it's happening right now. And even when we're talking about it, our heart is beating really fast. We feel the need to feel safe and protected, and we feel like we're still in imminent danger. Being able to accept whatever's happened, that it's happened, not saying it should have happened, not saying it was the right thing, it doesn't mean any of those things. It just means whatever has happened it's happened and it's in the past, and recognizing that we're now 10, 20, 30 years on from that time, and maybe there's some safety that you can cultivate in your life now. So acceptance can be quite grounded, quite useful. People might use techniques like grounding, which also helps them realize, right now I'm grounded, I'm connected to the present moment, I'm connected to the ground, I'm connected to my body, I'm aware of Allah Almighty. And we can do Islamic grounding techniques like mindfulness, like concentrating on our breathing, to remind ourselves that we're safe right now. We also want to accept that life is actually hard, and everyone's facing hardships, not just us. And life is meant to be a struggle. That is how Allah Almighty made it. And just knowing that can sometimes help. Thinking whatever happened, it doesn't mean something wrong happened in my life, or that happened to me for a particular reason. Actually, we're all facing certain hardships, and knowing that Allah Almighty won't burden us with something greater than we can bear, and seeing the benefits even in difficulty. even when we face difficulty. There are always some benefits, even though it's hard to see, even though we might not see that for years to come. But we know that there is something called post-traumatic growth, which talks about the benefits, the resilience that people develop from adversity. We also want to accept qadr and refer to qadr in our lives, that whatever happened, it was meant to be, it was decreed by Allah Almighty. And Imam Shafi rahimahullah talks about this, a famous quote attributed to him says, "My heart is at ease knowing that whatever was meant for me will never miss me, and that what missed me was never meant for me." Rather than keep on asking why, and blaming ourselves and getting into despair, we can try and accept that that was meant to be, and now it's time to try and move on and build a life from a different place, maybe with some of those tools, and taking lessons from those. So even though I mentioned about rules, and some of the rules can be unhealthy, we also want to take note and all the things that we've learned in our experiences, just making sure we've got a healthy balance between the lessons that we've taken from the event and developing unhealthy, rigid rules around ourselves. Life is a test from Allah Almighty. It's very easy to forget that. We're seeking comfort in this life, but we know this life is a test. And in Surah Mulk it says, He is the one who created death and life so that He may test which one of us is best in deeds. And we know in the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his life was a test. His father passed away before he died. His father passed away before he was born. His mother sadly died when he was 6 years old. His grandfather died shortly afterwards. They were expelled and chased out from their hometown simply for inviting people to Islam. And him and the early Muslims were boycotted. They had very little food. There was the battles of Uhud and Badr. He lost his uncle Hamza radiallahu anhu. He lost his wife Khadija radiallahu anha in the year known as the year of sorrow. Many of his children died in infancy, one of the hardest tests any parent could face, including Ibrahim and Qasim. There was a battle of Mutta, there were the events at Ta'if where he was physically hurt and chased out, and there was also the slander of the mother of the believers, Ayiesha radiallahu anha, who was the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And how did he respond? We know that he had the best response. He is the model for all of us, and we want to see, well, how did he respond? And if we can respond like that, then that's really what we want. So he responded with patience, with prayer, with sabr, with commitment to whatever Allah Almighty wanted, with good character, with gratitude, always turning to Allah Almighty, in some cases taking positive action, in other cases waiting patiently through the trials. He turned to Allah Almighty with hope, with gratitude, with optimism. In repentance, he was smiling, he had compassion. What would our lives look like if we responded to our trauma and adversity like he did? And just a note on that we need to be mindful that sometimes people listen to talks and they might think, oh, she said respond with sabr, and that means I need to put up with abuse and I need to put up with that. And it doesn't mean that at all. This is a general talk, and if someone's experiencing abuse, then it doesn't mean, keep on smiling and just carry on with it. We do need to make changes in our lives in certain times. So if anyone's got any, quote, red flags in their life, they're being physically, mentally abused, please seek the right help. Please try and discern your situation. This is a general talk about general principles that we want to apply in our lives when facing adversity. And sometimes having hope and having resilience and having sabr and all those things can mean different things in different situations. For some people, it might mean, putting down healthy boundaries with people, saying no to certain people. I'm not going to put up with this. It doesn't mean having no boundaries and doing everything for everybody else. Islam gives us the perfect balance. We are allowed to have boundaries as Muslims. We are allowed to say no. We are allowed to protect ourselves and protect our mental well-being. And these are things we're supposed to do. So please seek specific advice to your circumstances before applying general rules from what we've talked about today. Knowledge is the wisdom of the believer. Many of us are trying our best. And sometimes we're trying our best and we're still struggling with our life and we're wondering what's going on. And it's not easy. And sometimes we just need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. We need to try and have an Islamic approach to things. We also need to integrate Islamic tools and adopt a holistic approach. And I'll explain what I mean in the next few minutes. So I've talked about working on acceptance, and we sometimes think, well, I've worked on acceptance, yeah, that's what happened in my childhood, and I've accepted that and I've moved on. But then someone says something happens, and whoosh, it all gets triggered, and you're feeling completely overwhelmed. And you might be able to see, actually, I haven't accepted whatever's happened. It's still very raw. I'm still very affected by it. And that's okay. I think that's the journey. How do you know you've accepted and moved on from things? Sometimes we think we have, but then something comes along and it brings it all back. Acceptance and healing is a journey. You may be healing, you may have accepted certain things, and there's still work to do. So don't feel disheartened. Keep hopeful that this is the journey, and there's a few more buttons that have been triggered and they need a bit of work, and just keep on going. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to move on and heal from things. And even when we're trying to heal from adversity, we're facing new tests and trials. So it just continues, but we're becoming stronger, and maybe we can't always see it. Another important reason to be able to develop healthy responses to trauma is we can develop physical symptoms from trauma. So some of us develop health issues. Trauma lives physically inside our bodies, and the studies show this. People have low back pain, and that's associated with depression. So if you're not dealing with stress and trauma in healthy ways, it goes and lives inside our bodies, and it can cause pain. We also know that people with high blood pressure often have a very uptight personality. And where does that come from? Maybe it's a response to trauma. Chronic pain like back pain, headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, heartburn, they're all associated with stress. And many people notice that my symptoms did get worse. When I was stressed, that migraine came on, my irritable bowel flared up, or whatever else it was. An ACE study demonstrated how childhood adversity, and there's many other studies, so this one talks about childhood adversity affecting our physical health as adults, and it can contribute to asthma, heart issues, and even cancer. So really interesting to know how trauma can affect us as adults and the importance of dealing with it. And we don't always realize that. Many of us might be struggling with our physical and mental health as adults, and we're not making the connections to trauma and to childhood adversity, and realizing that we need to deal with certain things to move on. And I think we all need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves and realize that there may be certain things that have happened before, and it's not that we are useless and we're incapable and we can't get things right in our marriages, in our work, in our relationships. There's actually a huge amount of issues that we're carrying from the past that need a bit of work and attention. And if we can deal with those things, then life may be a lot more productive. We need to keep looking at action that we're taking. So even though there's been trauma, even though there's been adversity, and these things are all from Allah Almighty, we want to keep on focusing on the kind of person that we want to be for the sake of Allah Almighty. Keep remembering Yawm al-Qiyamah is coming, life is short. What good deeds do we want to bring on that day? What kind of life do you want to live? We don't want to get so kind of engrossed with our pain that we become victims and we can't grow and we can't use those experiences and turn them into strength. We want to use all our experiences as opportunities to become resilient and strong in our faith. Notice your own response to stress. Notice your own response to trauma. How have you dealt with it? How has it made your life better or worse? Does it affect your relationships, how you deal with people, how you deal with your children, if you're blessed to have them, how you deal with your spouse, how you deal with your parents, your friends, and other people? Are you someone who gets triggered and breaks away from people? Are you someone who's able to heal and maintain healthy relationships with healthy boundaries? Are you affected physically? Does trauma affect your physical health? Many of us have experienced trauma in our childhoods and we're not making the link as adults. And we're suffering in our relationships with our parents, with our marriages and our children. We can't bond with people, for example, because we have trust issues or we have confidence issues. Or we might be struggling with addictions like online addictions or comfort eating. Some people might say, well, I don't really have any trauma and I had a really happy childhood. And I'm really happy for you if that's the case. But generally the case is that Allah Almighty has made life a test. So whatever experiences you've had in your childhood, life's been a test and there's been a test. And sometimes, even though we have maybe had happy childhoods, we might have still picked up the trauma response from our parents. So our parents can experience adversity and unhealthy coping mechanisms, unhealthy emotional responses, and we might have modeled them too. So if you are having experiences and you still think, well, I don't have any trauma and adversity, there still is work to be done. We've all got work to do. We're all trying to develop our mental and physical health. Physical health, you won't get good physical health if you don't exercise and you don't eat well and you don't take the steps to have good physical health. And it's the same as mental health. If you don't take good steps to maintain your mental well-being, we won't have good mental health. It's not a given. It's something that takes active work to establish. So just summarizing here, to heal, we want to move forward with Islamic tools that we have. We want to use psychological tools like grounding, journaling, making du'as to Allah Almighty, and talking to Allah Almighty about our pain. Turn to Him. That's what He wants from us. We want to take physical steps, walking, exercising, eating the right foods, avoiding inflammatory foods like sugar. These can contribute to neuroinflammation and make our mental health worse, and they can make us more anxious and depressed. We want to incorporate healthy things like probiotics, vitamin D, B vitamins, ensure we're sleeping well, and find professionals who are trauma aware, and also using Islam to help us use all the tools that are to maximize our results. And as I'm talking about anxiety and depression, I'm not talking about clinical anxiety and depression in this presentation. I'm just talking about feeling slightly worried and feeling slightly low. If anyone's concerned about having clinical anxiety or depression, then please see your doctor. That's the end of today's presentation. Thank you.